Welcome to Make Your Money Matter with Brad Barrett, the show that aims to change the way you think about wealth management. Brad is a certified financial advisor, established radio host, and author of Retire Right. He is a managing director and partner at One Capital Management, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm managing over $4 billion for clients across the nation. Brad and his team are dedicated to helping clients protect and preserve their assets so they can reach their investment and retirement goals. And now, your host of Make Your Money Matter, Brad Barrett.
Welcome to Make Your Money Matter. I'm your host, Brad Barrett. I'm also a managing director and partner here at One Capital Management. I'm here each and every week to help you create a better relationship with your money because after all, your money matters. It is Thanksgiving week, and I'm sure topics of conversation, whether right or wrong, will inevitably be around politics. We're living, to be honest, in an unusually heated political environment. I think we all can agree with that. The vitriol is apparent, everywhere, on TV, social media, and of course, around dinner tables. And because the country seems so politically polarized, I'm sure some conversations could become heated at different times. So I thought this week on the Make Your Money Matter show, I would take a bit of a break from some of the financial topics and maybe dig into a little bit more of the attitude for gratitude, if you will. But before we do, pass the giblets and gravy, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single meal or episode. All right, let's get into it. One thing I'll say that I'm grateful for is getting over this flu. I don't know about any of you guys, but around the LA area, the flu has been going around for the past couple weeks, and I ended up catching it last week from my daughter, Kate. And I'll tell you, it was 3 or 4 days straight of 105 fever. I was seeing stars, let's put it that way. So if I sound a little bit nasally, that's why. As we enter the last leg of the year here in 2022, I want to talk about what a year it has been. We've been talking about it a lot on the show, so I figured we might as well finish it with a little bit of attitude for gratitude. Again, because America being divided, sadly, is nothing new. And I want to share that today. In fact, there have been periods where the chasm, if you will, between America's political camps has actually been much wider. It may not feel that way right now, but opponents were even more polarized early on in our history. Yet despite that truth, today's polarization, I think to many, seems kind of hopeless. But what I want to share here is it's not. And that's really, we need to all try to remember that this time of year, it's about coming together as one. So let's be respectful, let's be kind, and let's certainly be careful to limit the amount of wine we give to our, let's say, our more volatile family members. We all have that uncle, I know I do. And having grown up, by the way, in more of an Irish family with a bunch of kids, I know from where I speak here, but the holidays in general should be filled with family, with good friends, plenty of good food and cheer, celebrating our team, the American team, and our unique American values as one nation, indivisible. Let's not forget those words. The first Thanksgiving was celebrated in 1621. It began the first Thanksgiving as a celebration of the autumn harvest. Now, if anyone remembers their social studies lessons here, the Pilgrims landed in 1620, and that first winter was brutal, frankly. A lot of people died from the cold and from hunger in that first winter. Food at that time wasn't exactly plentiful, and shelter was really of paramount importance. So those who survived until the following year, 1621, were pretty darn appreciative people. And these new settlers were helped quite a lot by the Wampanoag Indians, who were the main inhabitants of that region at that time. So during the autumn harvest of 1621, the settlers and the Wampanoags came together sharing food and really their culinary skills in a day of celebration. And interestingly, there were roughly twice as many Wampanoags as there was settlers at that first Thanksgiving. And as legend has it, they were all able to, guess what, get along. Their common goal at that time was simply to survive. And this year, as I say this here, I'm sure there's a few people watching or listening right now that you probably feel that same way. Coming up to your Thanksgiving, maybe even your holiday dinners. But in all seriousness, in 1621, things were harsh. Life expectancy at that time was roughly about 35 years. So there wasn't a whole lot of time to waste on superficial nonsense. Surviving, simply staying alive was the main goal. And for many, it was a lofty goal. The odds weren't high that you'd survive, but let's fast forward now, roughly 2.5 centuries, our country at that time, if you look at that year, 1863, was in the middle of the Civil War, deeply divided. Remember at the top of the show, I mentioned that we've been in, larger divides in our country. I mean, think about that. The Civil War, we had a war between us here in the United States. 1863, middle of the Civil War, we were deeply divided. And in some ways, I think similar to today, we look at that divide. Now, we're not in a civil war necessarily, but we feel like it sometimes. And President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, seized upon the opportunity for a day of unity, all in an effort to bring a war-torn nation at that time back together. The day was proclaimed an official holiday, national holiday, and remains as such today, Thanksgiving Day. And I bring this up because as any of you watch or listen to the Make Your Money Matter show, you know that there's two things I like to focus on throughout pretty much every episode that I like to, thread through there. One is why we do what we do with money, why we do the things we're doing, the behavioral psyche of it, but also past performance. Where have we gone historically and where we are today? It helps us open up our lenses a little bit to see things around us, ahead of us, and behind us, not just focusing on the myopic today. This historical day evolved into what we know today as a day filled with turkeys and parades and football, kind of an all-American day. And of course, political discussions at dinner tables. There are probably as many different versions of the original 1621 autumn harvest as there are people with different points of view. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, we've heard the stories lately. There's just different viewpoints on that. But although it's now almost 400 years ago, there are some who will attribute a far more nefarious account of the day's events, but the legend of Thanksgiving that carried forward to 1863, the President Lincoln version, painted it as a day of appreciation. And that's how I choose to look at Thanksgiving, and I hope you do too. As a day that embodies our innate, natural, God-given tendency to care for our fellow man, to share, to come together as Americans, to really all get along and be respectful, even with those whom we disagree. And I know I'm saying that to many who are watching or listening right now who might find that actually extremely difficult. But that's how this country was founded. That's how God intended us to be, is to care and love for our fellow man. So let's try to do that this year. And again, like I said, the Make Your Money Matter show today is going a little off financial topics, but we're going to, thread some of that in here in a minute. But I really wanted to kind of share this as becoming grateful for what we have. We've seen an insane year in the markets. We've talked a lot about it here on the show. We talk a lot about it here at One Capital Management within our clients. And sometimes it makes a lot of sense right now to really focus on what we have. My grandfather always told me, your grass is always green where you mow it. So I'm not focusing on Mr. Jones's yard next door. I'm focusing on mine. And I think sometimes right now when we look at who has not, who has lost, what we used to have last year this time, because it's a lot different, right? We've seen a heavy shift in the past 10 or 12 months. But it's okay to take some gratitude and have an attitude for gratitude right now.
Stay connected. Get frequent updates on the show. Follow Brad Barrett and Make Your Money Matter on most social media platforms. And catch full episodes of Make Your Money Matter streaming now on our YouTube channel. To schedule your no-obligation appointment, go to onecapital.com or call 805-410-5454.
Today, it's easy to become disheartened about the great divide that separates America. I do. It's hard sometimes because I know I have my opinions as well because I'm entitled to that right, and so are you. And it's hard when others don't, and I think we're just getting pulled harder and harder away from each other, and I think that's a scary thing sometimes. I mean, the history of the United States and the direction in which the country has moved is defined by our adherence to the idea of tolerance for others. Ideas that are memorialized, by the way, in the Declaration of Independence, something I have right back there. Freedom to pursue happiness, however you define happiness, is important. To bring a little finance into this discussion, in the mid-1700s, Adam Smith, the famed Scottish economist and philosopher, wrote about a cornerstone for societies comprised of free people and free economies. Smith believed these societal structures must be free from coercion. It's the only way they're possible and the only way that they're truly free. Yet in the news, we've all been following the recent stories about, across the board the past couple of years, about a lack of freedom of opinion and suppression to some people's thoughts about their rights. I mean, Twitter and the new ownership has a hot topic around that right now. But when I was growing up, I was taught the basic motto. I may not like what you have to say, but I will defend your right to say it. That's the basis of freedom of speech. It was not only what I was taught or what I think we all were taught, it was how we defined ourselves and how I defined us as Americans. Really, peaceful disagreement. And although, the initial 1621 Thanksgiving Day feast between the Wampanoags and the settlers predated the Declaration of Independence by really more than a century, the values that we now have in Thanksgiving Day brought enlightenment, the enlightened thinking, one step closer to the ideals that would become, I think, the foundation for our great nation. That day taught us that by caring for others, we all benefit. By being tolerant of others, we can all survive. Political freedom is essential. So too is economic freedom. Something I talk heavily about in our practice here at One Capital Management and on our Make Your Money Matter show here. And each of those is dependent upon the other. We have to connect the two. When one is suppressed, the other is injured too. It doesn't work. Freedom of ideas, whether you agree or disagree with those ideas, is essential to our overall development in America. And if you look at it from that perspective, one thing I learned of nearly 2 decades in this business, as well as I remember learning this early on when I was a young guy, in economic school, is America, the United States, if you really look at it, is an economic marvel. I mean, there's not many countries like us. We know this, but remember, there's like 200 plus democracies across the world, a lot of which have freedom of speech. So what separates us right now, sometimes we got to remember, is not just freedom of speech, but it's also property rights and rule of law. Now, sadly, over the past couple of years, rule of law has really been questioned. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we can make as a country. So we need to stop that rhetoric right now. But America is also the bastion of human opportunity, because every citizen, you and I, have the freedom to pursue our dreams, our ideas, and of course, our own definition of happiness. America has celebrated many Thanksgiving days. And maybe this next part I'm going to mention was part of President Lincoln's design for the holiday. I don't know. But it's funny, right? Thanksgiving lands every 2 and every 4 years. It comes on the heels of midterms or presidential elections. I mean, the midterms a couple weeks ago, and of course, the 2020 election between Trump and Biden, although those are good examples of an election that divided our nations, I think, as of recent, I want to talk about another one. The 1960 presidential election. For those that are watching, maybe in your older, if you were around for this, you'll remember this pretty interestingly, because it was a very, very close contest. And as a result, America at that time became a divided nation. And some of my point about this example is that the media has a way of making us, I'll call it short-sighted, like it just happened or something, like that's all that's happening in our world. But this has been going on in our country for quite a while. Again, the 1960 election was very close, and as a result, divided our nation. In the spring of 1960, the country, if you look at history, fell into a recession. And anyone listening right now, again, who was living at that time period knows what I'm talking about. And I had to study this in economics for different time periods, but it wasn't a great time period if you look at it from a financial or economic standpoint. They fell into recession, and as history has taught us time and time again, presidential election results are largely determined by the country's economic climate at the time. Seems a little familiar, doesn't it? I mean, look at a couple of years ago, we had very polarizing. And for that year's Republican candidate, Vice President at the time, Richard Nixon, the country's economic climate created an uphill battle for him. I mean, in his battle for president against the Democratic opponent, who, by the way, was the charismatic young senator from Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy, because ultimately Senator Kennedy won the popular vote by just 112,000 votes. And just to put that in perspective for a second, that represents 49.72% of the popular vote versus 49.55% for Nixon, a very slim margin by any standard. Now, interestingly, Senator Kennedy won fewer states than his opponent, but the states he won were rich in electoral college delegates. Does that also sound familiar? Shades of 2016, Hillary? Anyways, Senator Kennedy was awarded 303 electoral college votes, and with that, JFK became America's 35th president. And from what began, this is where I'm going to tie a bow here on this. What began as a divided election result, he actually went on to become one of the most revered presidents in American history, even as short as it was. And my great hope, I think, for everyone watching or listening today, is that after this Thanksgiving, and given this year of 2022, really the past couple years we've all been living through, that we as Americans can look beyond our differences to our commonality and take pride in the miracle of what America stands for and its freedom. So my hope and prayer is that every one of you has a blessed Thanksgiving. I hope everyone is geared up and excited for a great holiday season coming up as we end and looking really towards the end of 2022 and into 2023. Lastly, I want to take some time and say thank you to our staff here at One Capital Management, to our clients who have given their trust in what we're doing for their planning. It is never lost on us the amount of trust that we have, and we are so grateful for that. And as a firm and as partners, as we've come together, as we've talked about this, leading and heading into Thanksgiving week, we want to say thank you. I wanted to share some of the history of some of the stuff that we've all been thinking about, and I thought it'd be good, as always, every week I like to do some research on where we are now and where we've been before. We always talk about finance here and how that plays its way into our mindset, into our psyche, into our marriages, into our family life, everything. Money, whether we like it or not, is a powerful thing. And the love of money, as we know, is the root of all evil, not money itself. It's important to know how that can give you options and to plan through it and for it. I mean, God says, don't worry about tomorrow, but he didn't say not to plan for it. So it's important to make sure that we plan through things and be ready for all of life's challenges. We are grateful that we're able to have this voice each week. I know I am. And we're so thankful that we're able to do what we love, what I feel God's placed in my heart to do for all of our clients. And that is planning for our clients' retirement through the proper structure of investments and looking at this world that we have in front of us at our hands, both domestically and internationally, and being able to diversify and protect the assets that our clients have entrusted in us. And so we are so very thankful. Okay, it's time to answer your questions. If you have a question or topic you'd like me to address, you can leave a comment or a question in the comment section. Or if it's something a bit more personal, just go to the About page on this channel, send us an email. We'll always keep the questions I read here anonymous, so never have to worry about your name being shared, but we would love to hear from you. And this week's question actually came from our producer, Brian Lemons, and I actually told him before, and I'm not even going to look at the question. I'm going to react live here on this. And so his question was this, and I'm going to read it here live. What is your favorite Thanksgiving dish? Okay, see, that's easy. I can answer that on the prepare. Stuffing, all day. Cornbread stuffing. My sister, she makes an amazing cornbread, and she weaves it into stuffing. Oh, man, it's amazing. I'll tell you what, I want to write that to you guys too. Hey, put some comments on our YouTube page, follow us on our social media, Make Your Money Matter. Would love to hear this week's Thanksgiving what your favorite meal is, because you know what? Let's stop talking about finances for a hot second. Let's talk about what we like to eat. Why not? Again, if you have a question or comment you'd like me to read here, leave it in the comment section or email us in the About page on our channel. Before we go, if you found anything helpful today and you'd like to learn more about One Capital Management, about what we do, you can visit our website. You can also call or text us. We want to help. Listen, there's no pressure here. We don't treat people like a number at all. In fact, we value our relationships. It's the lifeblood of what we do. So click, call, or text us today. And again, if you're not following us on social media, you should be. You can follow us at Make Your Money Matter. We're sharing great information on all of our social media platforms. And as I often say, if you enjoy the show, share with someone you like. And if you don't like the show, I guess share with someone you don't like. But until next time, always remember, make your money matter.
The information in this show is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration a listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision.